Hey everybody, welcome back to Readers of the War Game. We've got a really fun episode that was inspired by Space Marine 2. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen all of the cool gameplay and things like that have been going around, and maybe you guys have actually had a chance to tackle that game yourself. If you have, I'm kind of jealous. I haven't had the time due to my book coming out here in just a little over a month. Month and 4 days to be exact from the time I'm filming this on the 21st of September. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that I've enjoyed watching the gameplay, because it's given me a little bit of an opportunity to fill a little time or have a distraction playing in the background. And I wanted to create an army list with you guys today that properly represents the Tyranids the way you see them in the game. Because a lot of times when you see them on the tabletop, they usually play, or a lot of Tyranid players will play that big beefy army. It doesn't really match what you saw in Space Marine 2. So let's dive into it and talk a little bit more about Space Marine 2 and the Tyranids, who they are, where they came from, and why they're such a scary threat. So the Tyranids, especially in Space Marine 2, are a part of a larger hive fleet. They're a hive mind presence that is consumed with eating everything. They want to devour the entire universe in one fell swoop, and that is what they're after. In Space Marine 2, you're playing as Titus and potentially his friends, depending on if you're playing co-op, and your job is to stop the Tyranids from destroying this planet. It's a large fight. It's really hard in the beginning, which is a lot of fun to see. It's fun to see both him and Deathwatch trying to actually get this to a successful end. But the Tyranids you see in there don't really match what you see when it comes to the tabletop. There are some players that play it kind of similar, but the Tyranids you see in Space Marine 2 are a little bit more correct to what you see in the actual books. That massive swarm, an unending swarm that just washes over the defenders, which is something I always had a little bit of a hard time picturing until Space Marine 2. They do a really good job with some footage and side events where you literally get to see the wall of Termagants and Hormagaunts blasting over the top of Cadians or Space Marines, and despite all of their losses, they keep going. It was really, really fun to see. It was also really fun to see some of the things like the Hive Mind Synapse, where you take out a Tyranid Warrior and all of the smaller Tyranids around him would kind of panic and lose connection and would just kind of go crazy and fail to really be effective against you at that point. So all of that is really, really cool lore that we get to see with the Tyranids. And I wanted to create this list so that you got as much of that feel as possible. There's a few things that don't really match, that you won't have as much of a synapse response, which is unfortunate. I honestly think that should be a thing, where their leadership is dependent on what bigger units are around them. But that's an 11th edition thing, maybe later. So for now, we'll work with what we've got in 10th edition. This is the Pariah Nexus version of it. So that's where we're at currently. So if you're watching us far into the future, just know we'll have to adjust a little bit for that. If you are wanting to see the list, I've attached that in the description below. You'll get a link to the PDF, as well as a link to the cost list, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So for now, let's talk about the actual list that was compiled using a lot of help from a lot of the gamers who actually created a list of all of the Tyranids you run into. I then turned that into a playable list, which is available in the description, like I just said. So first off, we have to talk about the Warlord. The Warlord is a pretty obvious one. There's the Supreme Tyranid boss that you fight, the Hive Tyrant. I like to give him wings. It just makes it a little bit more fun. So I went with the Winged Hive Tyrant for my Warlord. His job will be to control everything. He can also lead some gargoyles, which will be a lot of fun as well. So beyond that, we have the three main battle line units that you fight pretty much the entire game. You have the Hormagaunts, which are the stabby ones, the Termagants, which are the shooty ones, and the gargoyles, which are the flying ones. We do a lot of those. By my math in the end to get the points we needed, that is 3 20 gargoyle units. You have 2 20 Hormagaunt units plus 1 unit of 10. For the Termagants, I had to do 3 units of 10. Now, there's a few tricks that came here as well, because you also see a lot of Ripper Swarms and Spore Mines. And unfortunately, you can't just buy Ripper Swarms and Spore Mines. I don't know why. It's kind of weird to me. So, to get the Ripper Swarms, we went into 3 units of Termagants for exactly that reason. Each unit of 10 Termagants gives you 1 Ripper Swarm base. So to get a 1 3-unit Ripper Swarm, I had to do all 3 squads of Termagants. In Space Marine 2, the Termagants aren't as common as the Hormagaunts or the Gargoyles. The Hormagaunts are the ones you're fighting near constantly, while the Termagants sit back and pick you off while you're distracted by the Hormagaunts. So I tried to keep them to smaller units to keep them more lore accurate to Space Marine 2. Along with those, there were several larger units that you'll be able to field as well to get this going. One of my favorites in gameplay was actually the Lictor. Not my favorite model, but in the game was spectacular. So I'm hoping he gets a rework here pretty soon. And then you have the Raveners. I also brought in the Von Ryan Leapers, which are kind of like lesser lictors. So you get a little bit more of that feel without having to just have 3 individual lictors. If you wanted to, you could do that as well. So that's your choice, whichever one you'd prefer, a lictor or the Von Ryan Leapers. I like the Von Ryan Leapers a little bit because they fight in a squad instead of individually, but they are a lot of fun that way. I also brought in Ravagers, Tyranid Warriors. I did 2 squads of Tyranid Warriors. So you get 1 shooting one and 1 melee one, just to give you a little bit more diversity in the units, especially where you're dealing with mass mobs of Hormagaunts, Termagants, and Gargoyles. It'd be nice to have a few other units that can do some things. Then I brought in some Venomthropes. Those are not in the game a lot, but they're probably my favorite Tyranid unit ever. They're really, really fun to hit with when you're not able to do anything else. And then we brought in some Zoanthropes, which are in the game. The Zoanthropes and the Venomthropes actually come from the same kit. So you just need to get 2 kits of those to make that work. And points-wise, they're exchangeable, so you can do 2 Zoanthropes if you prefer. Then, like I've already mentioned, we brought the Ripper Swarms and the Spore Mines. The Spore Mines, you have to get either the mucilid spores that come with the Spirocast or the ones that come with the Biovore. Either way, it's going to be expensive. You're going to end up with a bunch of extra units that were not in this list. That's just kind of how life is for Tyranid players, unfortunately. And finally, Carnifexes. You kind of have to have those in there. They're a major part of the game, and they're a lot of fun to play on the tabletop as well. So let me know in the comments below if you guys think that's a good list, or if there's things you'd change, or if there's any units that you think I missed from the game. I'm happy to do this. I haven't had a chance to play it myself yet, like I said, because I've been busy, but I have tried to watch as much gameplay as I could while building this list. So next, let's talk about modeling and painting. So the nice part with Tyranids is there's a lot of different hive fleets. You don't have to do the Games Workshop approved paint jobs. The main one that you see is Hive Fleet Leviathan, which you see in the game. So if you're wanting to stay lore accurate, you'd want to stay with that dark blue, purplish carapace and the pink bodies. But beyond that, there's a lot of other ways you can do it. I've seen some really cool yellow and black combinations. I've seen some camouflage ones, which were kind of weird. But however you want to do it and have fun with it. Because every single hive fleet does things a little bit differently and is constructed a little bit differently, color doesn't matter as much. They tend to have a darker carapace with a lighter underbelly, but that can be flipped. I haven't seen it done. I've seen people do very bright colors. I've seen people use metallics on the carapace. But anything you want to do, feel free to do. I would recommend testing on either a Hormagaunt or a Termagaunt. Make sure it looks good there before you do anything else, because I've tried. We used to have an in-house Tyranid army, and I went through probably 6 paint jobs before I ended up going back to the pink body with the dark blue carapace. And that ended up looking fantastic. But it did take a lot of effort. I did try a bunch of other paint jobs. I did find one other one that looked really cool, and I was kind of using it in combination, where it's a dark blue carapace and a tan body. And it was a more muddy brown tan, not a pinkish tan, not like skin tone tan. And it looked really good, and I kind of tended to use that for my stealthier units like my lictors and my leapers, while the more vibrant, like my venom thropes and my termagants and hormagaunts, were that bright pink color because they weren't really hiding from anything. We didn't end up selling that army, so I actually won't be building this list anytime soon. Tyranids don't like me on the tabletop. They love to beat up on me when I'm playing them, and they love to not play well when I am playing them. And so we decided not to keep the army. None of my playgroup really wanted it, so that's where we ended up. But if you're wanting to do it, don't take that as a negative. I know a lot of people who absolutely love the Tyranids, and the guy I sold it to actually is starting a Tyranids army. So don't let my curse with Tyranids stop you from doing this. They are a lot of fun for sure. So next, let's talk tactics. There's a lot of different detachments that would work with this style of play, but I personally went with the Overwhelming Swarm, just so I could get as much emphasis as I could on my battle line units. Like I said, there are several different ways you can go. Depends on what you're wanting to emphasize. If you're wanting to use your battle line as more skirmish line stuff and move them around to do objectives, just so you get your big stuff into position to beat the living daylights out of your opponent, there's a different attachment for that. But it's entirely up to you what you can do. The Tyranids have several different attachments that do play very well. Finally, let's talk cost. This army is not the cheapest by far. It's actually not the most expensive. Well, it depends on how you get the Ripper Swarms. I did end up dropping 2 units of the Ripper Swarms in order to bring the cost down. That would actually have added another $200 and made it the most expensive unit. I also dropped a unit of Swarm Mines as well to make that happen. So in the end, based on the list I have here, and all of the bells and whistles and little things I had to do to try and get the units for as cheap as possible, on Warhammer.com, it's going to cost you $1,368.50. So not the most expensive we've ever seen, but nowhere near the cheapest either. Now, we do have your local game stores and value vendors that can help you get things for less. I highly recommend using them. I use Wargame Portal and Amazon. Typically, if I can't find them at my LGS, I have a really, really good LGS here pretty close to me. But if you do that at value cost that you can find online, was $1,179. So a fairly significant drop that actually gets it in the realm of not unreasonable. So it also, as you know, normally I also do a fluffy list. Tyranids don't really have a fluffy list. Their units are what you get, and that's kind of how you deal with it. Most of the time, if we do a fluffy list, it's because we're dealing with the Imperium. There may be some other units as well that we can deal with, but for this one in particular, fluffy and value are going to be the exact same thing. Now, there are some other secrets to getting these Tyranids for less. The value cost does not include bundles like the Combat Patrol, or the starter set, or the Leviathan box. Any of those 3, or a combination of those 3, will get probably about 60% of this list knocked out very quickly, and for drastically less. So, if you're thinking about doing this, look at those first. You'll be able to pick up at least Termagants and Winged Tyrants, and Ripper Swarms, and Von Ryan Leapers in the Combat Patrols, starter sets, and Leviathan box. So take a look at those. You also probably end up with a Screamer Killer if you do the Leviathan box. The Screamer Killer can be a replacement for the Carnifex, although it takes it a little bit out of lore accuracy because the bugs that we're attacking were identified as Carnifexes. So it does give some leeway. I haven't done exact math because those prices tend to fluctuate a little bit depending on where you're looking and when you're looking. And I didn't feel like that'd be a good cost analysis to do in the end. But if you guys have any suggestions for good places to get inexpensive Warhammer stuff, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure everybody in the community would appreciate that. And if you have any thoughts on this army, anything I missed, or anything you feel like we should add to it as well, let us know. And finally, if you have any ideas for armies you would like to see, whether it be from Space Marine 2, the army that's kind of a spoiler still, which we won't talk about, or the Ultramarines, or any of those other units, the Death Watch maybe, let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to do those as well. And finally, make sure you like and subscribe. We have a lot of really fun stuff coming up over the next few weeks. If you actually look at our channel, you'll be able to see some of those upcoming videos. We managed to get a little bit ahead and preload those. So you guys will know what's coming. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.